I had planned the weekend with the kind of care you give to something you're afraid to hope for too much. 2 days by the water. No phone calls unless I chose to answer them. No conversations that required translation or emotional math. Just the house, the sound of waves hitting rock instead of shore, and the private understanding that I had earned the quiet. That lasted exactly 12 seconds. I knew something was wrong before I parked. The gravel shoulder that usually sat empty was lined with cars, too many, angled carelessly, some with hazard lights blinking like excuses. A hand-painted sign leaned against a palm tree near the driveway, Airsbh Parkey or 20 Alzenres. The letters were uneven, cheerful in a way that suggested confidence rather than caution. I sat in the car longer than necessary, engine still running, trying to make sense of it without panic. My first thought wasn't anger. It was confusion layered with a dull recognition. This felt familiar in the way bad habits do, surprising only if you pretend they aren't patterns. Inside the house, the windows were open. Laughter carried easily, loose and unembarrassed. My sister's voices overlapped, comfortable, practiced. The kind of sound people make when they're certain they belong where they are. They looked up when I walked in. 3 of them. Shoes kicked off near the door. A stack of small bills on the kitchen counter held down by a seashell I'd bought years ago because it felt heavy enough to matter. "Oh," the oldest said. "You're early." "I'm on time," I replied. The middle one grinned. "You're going to love this." I didn't ask what this was. I could see it through the window, strangers moving through the driveway, one man handing cash to my youngest sister like this was a lemonade stand instead of private property. "It's making good use of the land," she said, laughing. "You're barely here." That sentence landed gently, which somehow made it worse. Not accusatory, not defensive, just factual in her mind. Like gravity. I felt the familiar urge rise, the need to explain ownership, effort, boundaries. To remind them how the mortgage didn't pay itself, how family had never meant shared responsibility, only shared access. My mouth opened, then closed. I noticed how relaxed they were. How unafraid. How normalized the situation had become without me present. This wasn't defiance. It was assumption. I set my bag down carefully. "When did this start?" I asked. "Yesterday," the oldest said. "We figured the weekend crowd would be good. Don't worry, we'll clean everything up." Clean everything up. As if the problem were trash. I nodded once, not agreement. Just acknowledgement. I walked to the back bedroom and closed the door. Sat on the edge of the bed and waited for my heartbeat to slow. I wasn't calm yet, but I wasn't spiraling either. That felt new. This wasn't the first time my silence had been tested. In the past, it usually meant surrender. Today, it meant something else. I made the call I'd already rehearsed weeks earlier, after a casual comment from one of them about monetizing the location. Zoning violations. The commercial use of residential beachfront property. Paid parking without permits. I had looked it up not because I wanted confrontation, but because I was tired of being surprised. When I returned to the kitchen, nothing had changed. Money still exchanged hands. Laughter still filled the space. My sisters didn't ask where I'd gone. I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the counter. Watched. Let the discomfort pass through instead of directing it outward. The knock came sooner than I expected. Firm, official. Unmistakable. "Police. Open up." The laughter stopped mid-breath. My youngest sister looked at me first, eyes narrowing. "Did you?" I didn't answer. 2 officers stepped inside, polite but focused. They asked questions. Requested identification. Walked outside to survey the setup. Their tone never rose. They didn't need it to. "This property isn't licensed for commercial parking," one of them said. "You'll need to shut this down immediately." My sisters spoke over each other then, explaining, minimizing, reframing. It was harmless, temporary. Everyone does it. The officer listened, nodded, then repeated himself. Outside drivers were told to leave. Cash was returned awkwardly. The sign came down, its paint still wet enough to smudge fingers. I stood back, hands in my pockets, feeling oddly detached. Not satisfied. Not vindicated. Just aligned. For once, the external response matched the internal boundary. After the Ausers left, the house felt too big for the four of us. The oldest sister finally turned to me. "You didn't have to do that." "I didn't," I said. "I chose to." That was extreme. "No," I replied quietly. This was predictable. They gathered their things without much else to say. No apologies, no promises. Just tension folded into backpacks and silence dragged across the floor. When they drove away, the sound of engines faded quickly, replaced by the steady pull of the tide. I sat on the deck as the sun dropped lower, the weekend finally opening up the way I had imagined it. The quiet wasn't celebratory. It carried weight, loss, a clear understanding that nothing had been repaired, only clarified. I stayed anyway, because sometimes peace isn't reconciliation. Sometimes it's just the absence of entitlement.